Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Stefan, and today I'll be doing a nice little live stream on Stellaris 2.2 as it stands right now. So if you're not aware, I've put this in the thumbnail, the title, and the description, but there is a free Stellaris weekend, so if anyone knows anybody that tried to get into Stellaris but never did, my name is well, you know, you can recommend the game to them, you can maybe recommend the stream to them, and they'll be able to see how to play the game right off the bat. However, if you're already playing the game, you can still hang around and see how this works. So today I'll be showing off the basics of the game. I'll be showing off how to create a new empire, how to go ahead and pick the best set of civics and ethics, and then I'll jump into the game and show off the first 20 years and explain some things. Today I'll be covering the UI. Normally I don't do that, but since there are going to be many people that are going to be new to the game, hopefully, I'm going to just cover everything and we'll be good to go. I haven't done this before. All my videos have been for people with some experience, but this is going to be the first time. There's a first time for everything, and this is actually the second stream I'm ever making, and that is rather excellent. So let's begin. First and foremost, first thing you need to know about this game is that with whatever empire you play, you're going to be in the same situation. By the way, this is a mod, and this is not part of the original game, but that is a reference to SpaceX's launch of Elon Musk's car. So we spawn in the galaxy, as we do, and then we expand, grow, conquer, and destroy. This is a 4X game, which means, you know, it's a space-related thing where you gotta go explore, exterminate, and I forgot the other two, but whatever, that's alright. But in the basics of it, it's that you have a science ship, construction ship, you go in, you survey other systems, you discover various anomalies, and then you discover other empires that will, either be diplomatically good to you, or enemies for life, and you will have to destroy them. The goal of the game is really up to you. You can either try to conquer the galaxy, you can try to build up the best economy, you can try to provide the best living standard for your people, but there will be a crisis, and you will have to prepare for it. Well, that's pretty much the overview of the game. Let's get back into the main menu, and I'll tell you how to start off this game. Apparently my trades tier list link is broken. That is a bit of a shame. But since we're on the topic of description, there is a couple links in my description. There's a civics tier list, which will be helpful in choosing out the best empire type in terms of civics. And there's also an ethics trait list that helps you out with choosing, the best species for your empire. Apparently the two ones I forgot was exploit and expand in 4X. And obviously you do a lot of this in this game. You expand and then you exploit all the Xenos. And by the way, I'm not going to be referring to them as aliens, I will be referring to them as Xenos because, well, we can be fanatic xenophobe, we can be fanatic xenophile. Aliens isn't really a word in this game. But anyways, let's create a nice little empire, and I'll take you through the process, because some of you may be just starting, and just going through regularly will be the way to go. So first things foremost, you have a couple choices in terms of, your empire. Species. For example, for this one, we're going to go ahead and get a doggo. We're going to name him Doggo. We're going to, make the plurals doggos. And then you can actually auto-generate the adjective. Very convenient. We have quite a few name lists. Let's go with the SPQR, the Roman name list. And then we get to choose the traits. But before we choose the traits, it's really optimal to go ahead and choose the government that you're going to be playing with. This screen is one of the most complex customization starting screens I've seen in any game, and you have a lot of options. So as you can see here, there's ethics, authority, and civics. And the ethics and authority determine what kind of civics you can actually have. And so, for example, if we go ahead and choose spiritualism, we're able to take something along the lines, okay, let's actually choose this. We're going to be able to take exalted priesthood, where, we revere the priests, and, they produce extra unity. There's quite a few resources in the game, which I will cover very briefly before we actually talk about any civics. And those, if I can just load into an existing save, are going to be quite plentiful. Step 1, go play multiplayer. Yeah, you can also just play multiplayer and try to get someone, that you know to play the game, because they'll probably be able to just, go at your own pace and explain the game as it is. Also, right now I'm using the Dark UI mod. When you pop into the game, you're not going to have this nice little blue outline for everything and a blue color scheme. You will have a green one, and mods really help out with that. But anyways, this is what a more developed empire might look like, and we have quite a few resources. We have energy, which is basically your credits. You have your minerals, which is what you build space installations and buildings with on your planets. By the way, the planets I will cover more in depth because this is one of the hardest things in the game. Since 2.2, planet management has been kind of tough. Before 2.2, there was just a tile system where it was relatively simple and easy to learn, but now there's like districts, buildings, populations, corporations, etc. It's just very, very complex. Then you also have food. Food can be used to feed your people, if you want to feed your people. You can also just let them starve, but they'll be a little unhappy if you do. There's also some growth decisions. So for example, you can go ahead and enable extra growth on your planets. And growth is very important, I'll get to that later, but basically the more pops you have, the better off you are. There's really no circumstances where less pops means better, unless of course you're really in a special sort of empire where, I don't know, I can't really think of anything. Because generally more pops equals more resources, and even with overcrowding, they still produce more resources. Then there's also consumer goods. Consumer goods and alloys were something new added to 2.2, and they're a bit of a pain in the ass to manage, or at least they were just when I started 2.2. Before you just had minerals for everything, but now you have consumer goods and alloys. Consumer goods are, what they are, consumer goods. Basically TVs, recreation equipment, everything along those lines. And that is consumed by your population. There's really no other use for it. You can make decisions to increase your amenities. Amenities are also a pain in the ass to navigate and manage in the early game, and something you didn't have to manage in 2.1. But that's basically the extent of their purpose. You can set different species rights. You can set these guys to, chemical bliss. They'll be drugged out of their minds, and they'll be consuming a lot of TVs. I'll be referring to consumer goods as TVs from now on, and yeah, that's that. We also have alloys. Hold up, let me actually get the music up, because I realize I've been doing this all without music. So let's go ahead, and hopefully this should be good. Isn't that better? Also, research uses consumer goods and Unity production, but that is pretty much the extent of it. You also have alloys. Alloys are basically used for anything more complex and advanced within your empire. You have space stations, which are built using those alloys, and by the way, that is exactly how you expand. You build a station in a system, and the system becomes yours. After, of course, you survey it. This is what you need for your military. And, it's basically a second step to go through. You have to refine them from minerals, and you have to use pops and a lot of minerals to get a couple alloys. And alloys, honestly, are just unnecessary in my opinion. You can honestly just group them with minerals, but what do I know? I don't balance this game. But what you need to know is that alloys are quite important. If you want to build anything in space, you need alloys, basically, except for stations. For mining stations, you just use minerals, and it's quite alright. Because in the early game, where you actually are going to need to expand and claim all those minerals, claim all those resources, rather, you're going to need minerals, and alloys are a bit rare in the early game. Alloys is love, alloys is life. Basically, alloys equals space. And if you want to restore a megastructure, you go ahead and spend alloys. Also, just real quick, is the music too loud? Not too loud? Just let me know in the chat, please. Then we also have influence. Influence is what you need for political decisions. You can make a lot of different political decisions. You have your edicts, which straight up consume influence, and then you also have deals with other empires. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and form an agreement with these guys about research, it'll produce 0.25 influence a month. Rather, it will consume 2.5 influence per month, and you will really want to be on top of your influence. You don't want to spend too much of it because when decisions come around, you're going to want to have the influence to spend on them. And speaking of decisions, you're going to have various events pop up in your empire that are going to spice up the gameplay that you may or may not need influence for. So keep a small stockpile in mind, and you'll be all right. We also have Unity. Unity is generated for this specific screen only, and this is a tradition screen. Instead of a general tree that other games use, this really separates them all into 7 different categories. And you have your expansion, domination, prosperity, harmony, supremacy, diplomacy, discovery, and they pretty much do what they say they do. You have various effects that you get from choosing these traditions, and overall, going traditions is quite nice because you'll be able to get a bunch of bonuses to your empire, and the faster you do it, the more better off you are. Also, while we're on the topic of traditions, there are also Ascension perks, which you may choose to enhance your empire even further. Now, some Ascension perks are locked behind DLCs, as is a lot of content in this game, really. Stellaris is really jam-packed with DLCs if you really want to play the fullest extent of the game, and something like megastructures, massive things that you build in space, are going to be locked behind a DLC. And by the way, all the DLCs during this weekend are on sale. All of them are 50% off except for Megacorp, which is on 20% off because it's the first sale for Megacorp. And at this point, it's really worth it to just buy the DLCs if you don't have them. Also, someone's commenting, slave trade? Yes. You can trade your slaves. You can sell them. You can buy them. It's all great. And the game may lag out a bit occasionally because you may or may not have too many slaves. Yeah, there we go. All my slave population has loaded. Slavery is really okay in this game. You have a lot of options, and basically whatever you do, whatever you think you can do it. You can sell pops, you can purge pops, you can commit war crimes, atrocities, whatever. Other empires may not like it, but, who cares, right? Next up, we have research, and research is very important. In fact, since 2.2 came out, research has been key, and that is what I like to say a lot. Research is key. That should be my motto. I will make it my motto eventually. And basically, this allows you to go into tech and research tech. Stellaris has a very, very nice tech research system. We have a chance of other tech appearing once you research a certain tech. And if we just speed up the game for a little bit, we're going to be able to see that once these 2 techs are researched, there will be a couple options to go for in the future. This is not a conventional tech tree design, and every game is going to be different with this sort of tech tree thing. So let's just wait 20 days. Every time the game reaches the beginning of a month, you're going to be able to have some updates happen. For example, when it says a couple months remaining, it means a certain amount of months remaining until the first date of a certain month. And so, for example, we just researched planetary shields, and now we'll be able to choose a couple options. These options are random, but they are influenced by your empire. And so, for example, you can influence things to be more likely to spawn. For example, if you have a scientist that is a biologist, you're going to be able to get more biology techs. And all the different techs have different fields. For example, missiles are propulsion, matter compression is materials, etc., etc. And by the way, fleets are quite a nifty feature in this game. but the fleet combat itself is quite alright, so you're going to have to mostly focus on actually building up your fleets. Actual combat is more like, my number is bigger than yours, therefore I win. With a few exceptions, of course, but that is basically combat in this game. And you want to increase those numbers as far as you can go. So, for example, we're going to be able to choose extra energy credits from jobs and extra planetary build speed. Why the hell not? And by the way, all your resources, well, virtually all your resources, are going to be generated from jobs. And jobs are used by pops, and so the more pops you have, the more jobs you can have, the more production you can have. It's really quite simple. Research just helps you out with getting more bonuses to pretty much everything. There's quite a few different mechanics in this game that are really explored by research, and I'll be covering them in this video. Then we also have strategic resources, and these are kind of extra things, extra resources that you may or may not have to use. For example, something like an advanced research lab uses some of this gas, but it's not really necessary at the beginning of the game, and you can relatively easily just buy it off the market. If you cannot buy it off the market because it's too expensive, you can also manufacture it, but, you know, to each their own. But yeah, that's basically the resources in this game. And now with a basic overview of how everything works, we can go into empire creation so that you know approximately what works and what does not work. So let's go ahead, back into the menu, and we'll be able to start a new empire. Rip doggos, they didn't save. Alright, that's alright. Let's recreate them real quick. And by the way, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. And if you have any questions after the stream, you'll be able to leave them in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer as much as I can. So we're back to this government ethics screen, and for this one, we'll be playing with one of the more powerful builds, which is materialists. With materialists, you have access to robots and toasters and everything, and sometimes those toasters may even rise up against you. Just saying. Maybe sometime down the line, if you don't embrace them, of course. So with this materialist ethic, we're gonna be able to choose some authority, and we have a couple options. For example, we can go for something like Mechanist, which grants us extra pops at the beginning of the game and allows it to do research robots even faster. We can also go for something like Technocracy, which allows us to get more unity from scientists and get more scientists in general. Overall, Technocracy is one of the most powerful civics in the game, and in fact, I even have a civics tier list in the description. You may want to check it out. There's a lot of civics in this game, approximately like, what, 71? And covering them all in this little video will just take hours upon hours. So I have a nifty little tier list, and you'll be able to see the effects of all the different civics for yourself in the game. Of course, many of them have certain requirements, and some of them require certain government types. For example, there are mega corporations, which I'll be playing with today, which require the Megacorp DLC. They basically act as normal empires, but they also have branch offices, which allow you to settle other empires' worlds, and just open your branches and sell stuff to them. You can produce a lot of resources that way, and overall, this is a pretty nifty sort of empire. So, going with materialist, we have two more options for ethics. We can either go for two other ethics, or we can go ahead and go for fanatic version of an ethic. Fanatic version of an ethic is basically just, you know, the ethic times 2, and generally it has the same exact requirements as the previous tier of ethic, with the exception of a couple ethics such as pacifist, authoritarian, and egalitarian. With materialist and something like pacifist, for example, we're not going to be able to engage in unrestricted wars, and so that's why pacifist is kind of meh. But if you're just starting, pacifist may be okay, if of course there isn't a planet in the neighbor space that you really just want to take. In this case, you know, you take the benefits and you mourn your losses. With this empire, we're going to go ahead and actually go for xenophobia because I want to show off some features in this game with aliens, Xenos rather, where you can just go ahead, purge them, and end their lives in a very, very sweet manner. With Megacorps, you have just the single authority option, and you'll be able to choose a couple civics. The civics list for Megacorps is not as extensive as normal empires, but you do have some powerful ones, such as private prospectors and free trade. Of course, with Megacorporation, ideally you will want to go for Xenophile, but in this run, I'll just show off Materialist because that's probably what you'll be playing with regularly. Megacorp is blocked by a DLC, and so unless you purchase the DLC, you won't be able to play this. I'm just showing this off for people that haven't purchased the Megacorp DLC because, of course, this is a stream for anyone that is new to the game and doesn't have all the content. Basically, I'll be evaluating the value of the content and showing it off on stream. Also, you have a couple more options besides your government ethics, such as your homeworld. For example, you may choose to go for an Arctic world, desert world, a tropical jungle, whatever. We can generate a certain name for it, and we have a couple options for spawns. These are a little complex, I'll be covering them later down the line, but basically these are different options with different descriptions to them. In fact, there's a lot of descriptions to everything in this game. Basically anything that you can hover over will have a tooltip to it, and you can learn a lot from that. An absolute massive amount. The only thing is, obviously you need to know approximately how the game runs to be able to actually use this information, and that is exactly what I'm showing off in this video. We have quite a few customizability options actually. We can choose to go in Avian City, Millennium City, Planetoid City, Humanoid City, whatever. There's a lot of options, and customizability is very important in this game. But now we choose the most advanced customizability, the traits. And with traits, there's quite a few options. There's about 30 positive traits and then about like 10 negative traits, and all of them do different things. I have a traits tier list in the description, which is apparently broken, but I'll be able to update that a bit later. And with traits, you can customize your species even further for a certain purpose. So for example, once we choose to go materialist, it may be advisable to go ahead and choose scientific traits. Apologies. Yeah, I just had to go do something. But anyways, back on topic, we can go ahead and choose something like natural engineers, and that'll boost our engineering research even further. We can also go ahead and choose something like charismatic, so that we can produce more amenities from jobs, and something like fleeting to balance this out. Of course, this is not the ideal ethics setup. As far as ethics go, as far as government goes, it's also not ideal, and as far as traits go, this is not ideal. But you get to play around with the game, and you'll pretty much see what fits you best. Ideally, I would generally go for something like Thrifty, because this is a Megacorp. Something like Rapid Breeders, because Rapid Breeders is powerful. Balancing this out with Weak and Deviants. Deviants is pretty much a free pick, just keep that in mind. And all the other ones are decent in general. The negative don't matter. They do matter. Something like non-adaptive may increase your amenities consumption by quite a large margin. Since you have planets that you have to colonize, something like non-adaptive will add 10% to amenity usage and 10% to consumer goods usage. And that might not be too good, especially if you're not running something like charismatic and are having other problems with consumer goods. In the early game, consumer goods are a struggle, and you'll not really want to overdo it in terms of species rights, so that your species don't consume too many consumer goods. Factions, my dude. Yeah, but anyways, not adaptive is not going to be what we're going to go for. Instead, we're going to go for thrifty, rapid breeders, weak, and deviants, and that'll be pretty much optimal for this setup. We're also going to go ahead and choose the best advisor voice, authoritarian, and we're going to name our empire. You may hear some clackety clacking, and that is because I have a pretty loud keyboard, so apologies for that. There's also a lot of customizability options with the flags. You can go ahead and choose a background for your flag. You can choose a symbol for your flag, and there's a lot of symbols to choose from. Obviously, since the verb is the word, we're going to go ahead and choose this symbol, but something like this may show off your communism. Of course, communism is not efficient in this game, but you can still go for communism. You can go for fascism, capitalism, whatever you choose. There are so many options in this game that it's quite ridiculous. Pretty much any government type that you want to play is going to be in this game. You can purge Xenos, you can love Xenos, etc, etc. You can even interbreed with them if you're that nasty. There's different designs for ships, there's different color variants for your species. We can go ahead and go for this doggo and name this dog Faust Pondus. Let's make this a male doggo. There's a lot of options for clothes, there's a lot of options for rooms. There's also a mod that I'm using that allows you to have even more rooms. And these different rooms are quite nice, and this is what the other empires see when they contact you, so choose wisely. This is the different diverse backgrounds mod. Link in the description. So let's go ahead, trade free trade for free weekend, and we can start off the game with the customizability settings. Since I'll be playing just regularly, I may choose to go for something like Commodore or even Captain, but when I play on my own, I play Grand Admiral, and that is pretty much the highest difficulty setting you can go. Since we're just going to be competing with normal empires, as you would just starting out the game, we're going to go Commodore. We're also going to go ahead and set the number of empires in the galaxy. There's a lot of options for choosing how many empires there are. You can either go for max spawns, where pretty much every 5 or 6 hyperlanes or so there's an empire, or you can go for like 1 that you'll be able to find later down the line and compete with. But generally, the more empires, the merrier, and since we're playing as a megacorp, we'll be able to trade with them, and so more empires equals more profits. There's also fallen empires, which are literally just fallen empires that are extremely advanced and decadent hierarchies that consume like 7 systems in the galaxy, and that can get mean if you don't choose to follow their will. They will send different requests for you, and if you don't follow them, well, GG, you may get war decked and attacked. And generally those guys are quite powerful, so don't mess with them early on. There's also customizability for how many planets there are. So for example, I generally choose to go for 0.75. The normal amount is 1x, and 1x is generally a little bit too many planets. So I like to turn this down a little bit and play with that. There's also primitives, which you'll be able to conquer. For example, there's an Earth system out there, a Sol system rather, and you'll be able to invade the humans and maybe even interfere with the Second World War. There's an achievement for that. Speaking of achievements, I generally don't play with Iron Man. You can only get achievements with Iron Man, and well, the fact that I haven't played with Iron Man means that even though I have like 1,300 hours in this game. I have 0 achievements. 0, none. I've played this game for so long and I have nothing to show for it. Hell yeah. There's also crisis strength and mid-game and endgame start years, and this pretty much determines when shit hits the fan, and you'll be invaded by 3 variant empires. There's the Unbidden, which are pretty much psychers, just, you know, manifestations of energy that will come and eat everything. There's also pretty much the Tyranids, the Precursors and Scourge, which will also come in and eat everything, and there's also the Contingency, which will also come in and purge everything. There's a lot of purging going on in this game, and likely if you spawn in an empire with 18 empires, there will be a couple that will want to go out and just purge you for the hell of it. There are exterminator empires out there, and with those empires, the playstyle is just a tad different. Basically, your main objective is to conquer the galaxy and purge everything, with the exception of your own species, of course. Although, even that, you can purge. But yeah, anyways, there's also some different settings such as AI aggressiveness, empire placement, advanced neighbors, etc, etc. Advanced neighbors, by the way, are just empires that are better off than you at the start of the game, and generally it's a little unfair if you spawn next to them, so I keep them at 5 and turn off advanced neighbors, because if you have an advanced purifier, which will come out and eat you, you won't be in a good spot. Not at all. You'll probably die instantly. So I try to prevent that by turning advanced neighbors off. Alright. Obviously in this playthrough we're going to be playing against AI, but you can also choose to play against players. Players are generally a little bit smarter. With AI you can use a couple tricks that I'll be showing off in this video to actually survive. But anyways, let's proceed with this new empire setup. You may see that there's a lot of different tooltips, a lot of different numbers, and a lot of different options out there as you begin the game. And that's because this game is really meant for people that know what they're doing, and generally it's pretty hard to get into it. In fact, when the game updated to this state from 2.1 to 2.2, a lot of people just didn't update. Like, straight up. They felt that this was way too much, way too overwhelming, and if you're one of those people, please consider 2.2, and please consider that there's a lot of different options added to the game, and if you know how to use them, it's a lot more fun. But anyways, there's a lot of different little tooltips out in the game that help you out with figuring out what the hell is going on, but I'll be covering everything real quick. So right off the bat, you have your outliner. This is your most important parts, and you have your empire capital, you have your buildings, and the more planets you have, the more planets you will have in the outliner. There's also stations, which are used for space construction and fleet production. And if you want to go to war, of course, you'll probably want some shipyards, so that you can actually produce some ships. There's also your military fleets, which you'll be able to move around and conquer other empires with. Basically, it's a case of you attack with this number, 108, they attack with 30, and then you win. And that's that. Of course, there's a lot of different options for actually customizing the ships, but numbers reign supreme, and unless you have a very specific counter design, bigger numbers equals better fleet. There's also different ships. There's civilian ships, one of them is constructions, and these can build mining stations to get resources from, natural spawns. For example, if you want to build a station around Hibernia, we'll be able to spend 1 energy per month to get 3 minerals per month. And this takes a nice upfront investment of 100 minerals. Generally, it's very worthwhile, and I build up all the stations that I can. There's also science ships, and science ships are vital in the exploration aspect of the game. You can go ahead, survey different systems. By the way, the galaxy is generated in hyperlanes, so you'll be able to have a couple choke points, and you'll be able to have restrictions on where your ships can actually move around. But basically what you need to do with your science ship is go ahead, survey a system, and maybe survey another system, and another one. There's also a button for this, which you can go ahead and use, but generally I'm too lazy to actually click, and I just go ahead and click Explore and Survey, like this. Right off the bat, you may actually want to go ahead and just explore some systems, because your priority in the beginning will be to get another planet. So we'll just queue up a science ship, and he'll be able to explore all the different systems around us. The reason planets are so important is because all your production will be going on there, and I'll be showing how to develop the planets for maximum production, but later in the stream. But now it's time to cover these little tooltips. There's going to be a contact screen where you can contact other empires with. There's also a situation log where stuff will happen if anything happens in your empire, such as anomalies which are discovered by science ships, or situations which happen just randomly and can occur as a result of discovering another empire, maybe discovering some xeno life out there that is not an empire, and you'll be able to generally research the situations. There's also, the market, which you'll be able to use to balance out your economy. The market is extremely useful, and knowing how to use it is vital to a new player. Basically, you click to sell, and you click to buy, and you get more resources out of it. Obviously, there's a little commission fee, so you won't be able to just instantly convert all your resources. So for example, we'll be able to sell alloys for 280 an alloy, but we'll be able to buy them for 520. So it's generally inefficient to just be selling and buying stuff, but if you really need a resource, it's more efficient to just buy it from the market than redevelop your entire economy. If you have minus 100 in a resource, for example, you can just add a monthly trade and just buy the resource 100 per month. This will be extremely expensive, however, and I generally don't advise you do that. Someone's asking about technology. I will cover that a little bit later. For now, let's go to planets and sectors, and this is pretty much the most useless screen that you'll ever see. So far, there's really no viable sector system, and though you can get automation going for a sector, which will theoretically produce resources, it's not really good at this point in the game. Planet development by AI is kind of trash, and you generally want to develop your planets on your own. But if you're just starting out and you don't want to bother with this, you can just choose a balance, and you'll be able to just, set a certain sector to manufacturing. Some sectors are generated by the distance from the sector capital, and so for example, a couple hyperlanes from here, if there was a planet, it would be in the same sector as our home world, and it would only be in the sector if we conquer the planet and colonize it. But generally you don't want to be using the sectors, and so I'll just leave the sector to disabled. There's also an expansion planner, which you may use if you're just really new to the game, which will outline a couple planets that are near your borders, and the planets that you can actually colonize. Let me just real quickly use console commands to show that this generates a lot of planets near your borders. Using the survey command also just surveys the entire system, the entire galaxy rather, and you'll be able to see all the planets out there and whether or not you can actually colonize them. There's habitability levels for planets, although I generally recommend to just ignore that and colonize everything. It may be a little hard to manage in the early game, but later on you'll be able to produce a lot more resources than those low habitability worlds consume. Low habitability does not impact the amount of resources you create, rather it impacts the amount of upkeep for every pop. Every pop has an upkeep, and for example this clerk over here consumes a food and 0.25 consumer goods every month. And on a planet with 0 habitability, for example, it'll consume 2 food and 0.5 consumer goods per month. However, it's still worthwhile to colonize low habitability worlds, and the more planets you have, the more pops you have, the better you're off. Now, this expansion planner may help you out with actually looking for good planets, and it has a lot of relevant information that you may also just grasp from looking at the planets themselves. There's also policies screen where you're able to just go ahead and choose your policies on certain topics. For example, you can set your war philosophy to defensive wars, liberation wars, or, which is generally the best option, unrestricted wars, where you'll be able to just attack anyone and claim their systems and conquer them. Orbital bombardment is another stance, resettlement, land appropriation. Basically, there's a tooltip for everything, and if you really want to get into it, you can read the tooltip and figure out what it does from the tooltip. Some of the more important policies, however, are food, economy, and trade. These ones I generally like to set to certain values. For example, food policy is generally better off on nutritional plenitude than strict rationing, because while you consume more food per pop, the pops are happier and will breed faster. And the faster your pops breed, the better. Economic policy is a mix. You can either go for a civilian economy, militarized economy, or a balanced economy. Going for a certain type of economy increases the resource production for a certain good, consumer goods or alloys, and in the early game you will generally want to go civilian, and in the late game you will generally want to go militarized. Trade policy you will generally want to set to consumer benefits once it hits year 10 or so, and that is because trade value will now generate consumer goods. And consumer goods otherwise have to be generated on your planets using valuable building slots and valuable pops. Trade value, however, is generated by pops in general as megacorp, and getting a lot of trade value is relatively easy. And so going for trade value for consumer goods is generally quite efficient. Otherwise, you'll just get an energy credit per trade value, but with this policy, you'll be able to get 0.25 consumer goods as well. There's also a couple policies on artificial intelligence and robots, and with that you'll be able to just choose what your empire chooses to do with robots and AI. For example, since we're playing as a materialist, we're going to want to go for citizen rights on this empire, and on this robotic species, and just integrate them into our society. There's policies on refugees. Refugees are generated when someone commits war atrocities out anywhere in the galaxy, and I generally recommend setting refugees to off, unless you're playing as a xenophile and are planning to convert them all to robots later down the line. In which case, refugees welcome. Welcome all. Yes, we'll just be able to put you into robot husks and send you to the salt mines. This is of course an option if you play with Utopia. Otherwise, you'll just have to satisfy yourself with no refugees, because refugees are, generally a pain in the ass to deal with. They are extra pops, they are extra resources, but they do come with their drawbacks, and having more species to manage is never a good thing. Speaking of species management, there's a lot of different things you can do for your species, and once you have multiple species, this becomes a little bit more interesting. For example, you can set a certain species to full rights, and a certain other species to slaves, and those slaves will produce resources for you. They won't have a lot of political power, they won't consume a lot of resources, and they won't be really happy either. So you might want to have a slave underclass, but you'll want to make sure that there's some pops, your main species, keeping the slaves down. Living standards are another option. For example, since we're playing with materialists, we have an option to go ahead and choose academic privilege, which increases consumer goods upkeep for certain species, certain pops rather, and certain jobs. As far as jobs go, there are 3 different classes. There's rulers, specialists, and workers. And the higher a class, the more consumer goods you consume, and the more power you have. So for example, our power approval rating is 70%, and that is largely influenced by the fact that our rulers make up 1/3 of the happiness total, even though there's only 2 of them, rather than all the workers and all the specialists. This is very much pyramid society. But anyways, let's get to edicts. And edicts are basically just decisions that you make, which generally consume influence, but can also consume special resources. Later down the line, there's also edicts that can consume energy, and those are generally good to just perma-run. Basically just choose them every decade or so when they expire, and get continuous bonuses to your empire. All of these different edicts have their own values associated with them, and if you really need something, it can be very helpful to get an edict for it. Now traditions I've covered a little bit before, but basically you generate unity, you get an unlock, and you'll be able to spend a point in one of these research trees. Every tree has an adoption effect, which allows you to get a certain bonus, which is generally the most powerful of the tree, and also a finisher effect, which is an effect for completing the entire tree. Completing the entire tree takes a while, and getting to the end of it will net you a reward. It will also unlock an Ascension perk, which is useful, very useful, and you'll be able to choose a couple options, which can help you out significantly. There's also a ship designer out there, which is a little complex, so for now, I generally recommend leaving this to auto-generate, but I do have a ship's guide on the channel, which you can check out for some good ship designs. There's also Fleet Manager, which you can use to manage your fleets. Generally, this is a little complex, but if you really want to know how to use it, you can just mess around and just click on the buttons. Tech is a little bit more important though, and I won't be skipping out on this. You have your planetary unification as a tech, for example, which can give you extra unity and extra edicts. And generally this is a very good thing to take at the beginning of the game. Every research will have a certain amount of months to complete, and though we are at the beginning of the game, once we update for the first month, we'll be able to see how long each tech takes. Alright, so for example, getting higher research speed will take 87 months. Planetary unification will take 83, and mining will take 90 months. Generally, the longer a tech takes, the better it is, and there are certainly various tiers of tech in the game. There's expensive tech, which can produce a lot for your empire, but there's also endgame repeatables, which can produce a little bit, but can be chosen over and over and over again for continuous bonus to your empire. Generally, with the beginner techs, you'll want to go for either unity or growth speed for your society, research speed or physics research for your physics, and robots or extra research for your engineering. So we'll just go ahead and take some of this, and we'll be good. Alright, next up we have factions, which don't appear yet, and that will appear a little bit down the line. So let's save the game right here, and I'll show off a developed empire. So as you can see here, with this empire we have factions, and factions you generally want to keep happy because they produce influence for you. And the happier factions and the more approval your faction has, the more influence it produces. All of these have different values to them, and for example, this faction doesn't like the fact that I have indirect analogy enabled. So we can go ahead into policies with native interference and put them on passive study. And now faction should be a little bit more happier and should be producing a little bit more influence. And that's basically how it works. They have certain requirements to them, and if you meet those requirements, they'll be happier and produce more influence. They also have an effect on pop happiness, and the less happy your pops, the more problems you will have. So you generally want to keep your factions happy, because every pop has a faction that it is attracted to, and you know, having a large displeased faction may cause a lot of problems. But anyways, getting back to the beginner empire. One other thing that you may have to manage are your claims. And claims are something that you fabricate so that you can actually take a system during a war. I'll be showing off wars a little bit down the line, and so we won't really be using claims at this point in the game. You can only claim other Empire systems, and when there's just empty space, you cannot make any claims because you can just take the systems. You don't need claims for that. You also have your leaders screen, and with leaders, there's a lot of options out there. You can recruit leaders with certain traits and leaders with certain ages. For example, a leader with an age of 28 will live for a lot longer than a leader with an age of 50 or so, because, you know, obviously, when you're over 80, you have a chance of dying, and that, of course, can be increased with techs, but generally, the younger, the better. There's also traits to them. Every single trait does its own thing, and all of them have their own tooltips to them, so you can just check out what they do in the game. But anyways, that about does it for this little outliner. By the way, generally it will be like this, where you can hover over it and see the description of it, but there's also a little lock, so that, for example, this navigation bar can be locked when I'm even hovering over it, and it's generally very convenient and can keep the game a lot cleaner. Also, speaking of cleanliness, there's an outliner out there that can be closed and that you can also manage. I haven't really seen people cover this, but there's a lot of outliner options out there. You can rearrange the way your outliner functions. And yeah, for example, if you want to keep your civilian ships at the very top, you can go ahead and put them up, and you'll be managing them first and foremost. Yeah. Obviously, it's generally better to just keep planets on top and keep anything else at the bottom. Obviously, there's a lot of options out there, and you can even disable some options. So if you don't want to see your planets, you know, you won't see your planets, and it'll just be a clusterfuck, because knowing what is going on in your planets is very important. For example, right now we can see that there's a building site available on our planet, and this generally is going to mean that we're going to want to build a building, because the more specialists, the better. The more pops to actually produce important resources, the better your empire will be, because raw resources that are produced by workers are just that. Raw resources that you can't really use in a war or in increasing your prowess in terms of tech. But yeah, I believe that about does it for just the basics. And with that, we'll start off an actual game. So obviously I won't be able to play with this game because I have just used console commands and surveyed the entire galaxy. But if you go ahead and start a new game with the doggos, we'll be able to check out the game as it truly is, with the fog of war and everything. Alright, let's begin. So we have spawned on the right side of the galaxy. We have a couple choke points that we will want to take, and that is simply for defense. The more choke points you have, the less you're going to be efficient in terms of war, because that's going to be more choke points that you will have to cover in terms of your fleet. First thing that we're going to want to do is just build up some stations in our home system. Every single time you spawn, there's a certain amount of resources in your home system that you'll generally want to claim. There's also going to be your science ship, which will want to explore other systems and look for planets. The more planets, the merrier, and getting more planets up and running is generally the most efficient way to go about it. At the beginning of the game, we also choose some techs. So for example, for this guy, we're going to choose fusion, extra unity, and extra research. And now, that about does it for the beginning setup. So we can just start the game, go on fast, and I'll be covering everything that comes up as it comes up. While we're waiting here for the Empire to actually do stuff, I'll be able to answer some questions in the chat. Stefan, do you play Imperator Rome yet? No, I do not. Imperator Rome is a bit of a botched game. It's really simple at this point in the game, and I'll wait maybe a year until the DLCs come out, and the game is more ready to play. Right now, it's just basically a scaled-down version of Europa Universalis, and you know, it's not really attractive for me to play. Stefan, penalties for insufficient resources. Yes, if you run out of resources, you will, suffer penalties. For example, if we just go ahead and unemploy all these farmers and just sell our food, you'll see that we have some problems coming up very shortly. All right, insufficient resources, and we have minus 25% to happiness and 75% to pop growth reduction. So basically, running out of food means pops can't really reproduce. And of course, they'll also be a little grumpy because they can't reproduce. So you generally want to keep your pops as happy as possible, and keeping them fed is a prerequisite. Also, the pop growth reduction is extremely severe, and it'll mean that you won't really be able to get more pops up and running. But that's just food. There's also a lot of different options out there for penalties for resources. For example, running out of energy reduces the capacity of your fleets to function. They reduce the amount of armor, shields, and weapons damage by 75%, and your fleets pretty much become useless. It also reduces the amount of minerals you produce, and if you're out of minerals, it reduces the amount of alloys and consumer goods that you produce. And if you're out of consumer goods, it reduces the amount of unity and research you produce. If you're out of alloys, it reduces the amount of fleets that you can actually manage, and your fleets will be a lot less efficient. Is there a way to change the hotkeys for the menu? Does your screen not edge scroll? It does not edge scroll because I have a mod for it, simply for the sake of recording. Because I have a big monitor, and this 1080p game actually runs in a small window on the screen. Also, there's really no hotkeys. If we go into the settings, you will see that there's no option for hotkeys. And that is a bit of a shame. Any hotkeys that you have in the game are basically just something the devs implemented. And for example, upgrading a station is the U hotkey, and you cannot change this in any way, shape, or form. Also, speaking of this empire, we have discovered a system with 2 planets in them, and that is absolutely wonderful. So let's go ahead, build a colony ship, and set out to colonize this planet. But first though, we'll have to survey it with a science ship, and claim it with a construction ship. This requires time for the survey, and requires influence and alloys to actually build the station. For now though, on the planet that we have, we can go ahead and build a nice little research lab. The more research, the merrier, and getting research labs on your planets is a priority. They do consume consumer goods, because scientists consume consumer goods, and otherwise, they're generally pretty good. The more research, the merrier, and research is obviously key. Let's actually speed up the game a little bit more.
Anomaly found.
In the meantime, we may also build another science ship, and we can send him over to the north so that he can survey and maybe find some planets over there.
Star system charted.
Alright, this system is surveyed, and we can go ahead and build a starbase there. Our colony ship is about ready to go, and so once this system is built, we'll be able to come in and colonize it very soon.
Construction complete. Construction complete.
Scientists can take a TV and a toaster and are like, yeah, I can turn this into 10 plus pop growth for the entire population. Yes, that is what they do. They take the TVs and they turn it into wonders. But anyways, we have our colony ship all ready to go, and we'll be able to go ahead and colonize this little planet. We also have an option to select a tradition, and for the beginning, it's generally advisable to go expansion. That way you have extra bonuses to early expansion, and the faster you grow, the better. In this game, snowballing is a very real thing, and so if you can snowball very fast, you'll be ahead of the curve, and you'll be able to curb stomp every other empire. Also, we have another science ship here, so let's go ahead and recruit another scientist. Let's go for the youngest one, and send him over to explore the north. Since this system also has another planet, we'll be able to get another doggo up and running, and we'll be able to send him over to Calberos. In the meantime, we can go ahead and talk about planets. With planets, there's a lot to manage. Genuinely, I think it's a little too much, but it does allow a lot of room for micromanagement. We also have another planet here, so let's go ahead and survey the systems leading up to it. But planet management has districts, buildings, populations, and decisions. And all of these things are very important. And all of these things will need to be covered. So let's go ahead and cover them. First and foremost, you have your districts. Districts generally produce worker jobs and produce housing. Housing is important so that you can actually get your pops up and running and not have them suffer because of low housing. Districts produce resources. For example, generator districts produce energy, mining districts produce minerals, and agricultural districts produce food. The pops that need to work on them are obviously pops that may be used in other ways, and so just going pure districts is generally inefficient. You'll want to do something with the resources these pops produce, and turning them into consumer goods, alloys, and research is generally the way to go.
Anomaly found.
City districts, on the other hand, provide a lot of housing and a clerk job. Clerk jobs don't produce the basic resources, instead they produce amenities and trade value. Trade value is pretty simple. It basically just is converted at a certain rate into energy or consumer goods, and amenities are a bit more of a problem. Your pops, in addition to food and consumer goods, also need amenities. And amenities are produced by certain pops. For example, our rulers produce some amenities, and our clerks produce some amenities. If you don't have enough amenities, the pops will be unhappy, and they'll want to leave. And you generally don't want that. You want your population to be kept as happy as possible, and keeping amenities above 0 is the way to go. You actually get more penalties for having low amenities, and you get benefits from having high amenities. And so going over 0 is generally inadvisable because obviously amenities require pops to actually produce them, and the more pops you use for producing amenities, the less pops you'll have to produce anything else. Why don't I build minor and research stations in the first place? Is this a tip or something? No, it's not. I've been distracted with saying stuff. Generally, you will want to build as much as possible, and I've been kind of slacking on that.
Star system charted.
Just got here. Are you playing with corporation? Yes, I am. But alright. Now that we've covered the districts, we can go ahead and cover the buildings. Buildings generally produce specialist or ruler jobs. With buildings, you'll be able to get artisans, enforcers, metallurgists, researchers, and clerks, in addition to any rulers. So having a lot of buildings which produce the proper jobs is important. Right now we have unlocked another building slot, and now we have an option to build another building. Building slots are unlocked with the population, and so the more pops you have on a planet, the more building slots you will have. Every pops you get an extra building slot, and so keeping the values of population around 30 or 35 or 40 is advisable. There's a resettlement option between different planets, which you may be able to use to just go ahead and unlock all the building slots that you can. There's also this thing, Precursors. At the beginning of the game, you may discover a fallen empire that has kind of disappeared off the face of the galaxy. These guys you'll want to research.
Situation log
They have their own special anomalies, and getting more anomalies from them will allow you to actually research them and unlock their home system. In the base game, only the First League and the Cyberx are really worthwhile, but the Voltron and the other guys that I cannot recall are just kind of meh and give you a little bit of extra resources. So since we're not getting the First League, I'm not really going to focus on obtaining them. Ooh, what's this? That looks like a science ship. And that means another empire is here. So let's go ahead and try to expand over here. We will want this choke point so that we can actually defend a single location instead of 2 or 3. We'll want to research these guys. So let's go ahead and investigate these Alpha Menace. And if we discover them first, they won't be really mad at us. If they discover us first, they'll get a -20 opinion, and because we're filthy Xenos that they had to spend time researching, they'll be unhappy about it. And now we got an extra tradition. Let's go ahead and get something like Expansion Fever. And yeah. For now, we might want to go ahead and get another science ship going, and another colony ship. That way we'll be able to survey this part of the galaxy, and we'll be able to also colonize this planet once we can.
Star system charted.
It is worth colonizing every single planet, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's worth colonizing every single planet, and if you don't, that's really inefficient, and you shouldn't be doing that. We also have another unlock for tech, and now we can go for extra mining output. Why the hell not?
Construction complete.
Also with scientists, there's a thing that may pop up occasionally, and that is anomalies. You will generally want to skip them at the beginning of the game. Instead, you will want to just research all the systems that you can, and afterwards, after you're done expanding, you may go ahead and just research all of these. To research them, you can just choose a science ship and just click around and research all the anomalies in systems. The higher level your scientist, the better you're off, and the faster they'll research anomalies. But now let's get back to planets. Obviously, buildings are important, and there's actually a lot of options for the buildings. There's alloy foundries, civilian industries, consumer goods, etc., etc. But generally, the most worthwhile buildings are alloy foundries, which produce alloys in case you need to build a fleet, civilian industries, which produce TVs that, you can actually get your pops to be happy. A lack of consumer goods decreases their happiness and output. And research labs. Research labs are important because they allow you to actually get more research, and the more research you have, the better you are. And that's basically it. These are the most useful buildings out there, and with the exception of hollow theaters, all the other buildings are really not worth it generally. But now we have discovered another Xeno race, and it seems that they actually have a megastructure in their borders. How neat. The Zaplo regime, a military dictatorship. We can see that they're a fanatic authoritarian militarist, and that generally does not bode well. So we can just call them alien scum, and see how they expanded. Alright, so they have minus 30 opinion, and they are quite large. They have an overwhelming fleet, they have an overwhelming economy, and it generally looks like they have an advanced start. To make sure that they're not outright hostile to us, we'll open our borders and just give them a quick deal. What you can do with AI is you can just go ahead and bribe them, and by giving them 700 minerals, we'll be able to get 92 opinion. And with that, they'll be wary of us, and they won't attack. An AI can only attack if they're hostile, and keeping them away from that will just keep them nice and safe for us. There's also other ways to actually get an empire to be more friendly to you, such as, for example, a guarantee of independence. Of course, we can also just go ahead and add to the trade deal, get a little bit more opinion. Opinion, by the way, caps out at 100. No, not opinion, but the opinion from trade deals caps out at 100. And going more than that is just giving them resources, which is inefficient. So just give them enough to make them like you, and sign whatever packs you want. For example, since we're a megacorp, we'll want to sign a commercial pack with these guys. That way, we'll be able to use a feature of the megacorp, which is the branch office. For that, I'll just slough some resources, and we'll just be able to go ahead and establish a branch office on their home world. So what we do is go to corporate, establish branch office, and it consumes some energy and influence. In exchange, we get a planet which we can actually develop. So on all these planets that we have a branch office on, we can just build a special building, for example, private research enterprises, and that'll increase our research production for the cost of some energy. Since this is a branch office and the people working there are the people on the planet, we won't have to use any pops, and so the more planets that we get branch offices on, the better we are without any negatives. We won't have to upkeep any pops, and in fact, the more trade value a branch office has, the more resources we're going to get from it. And so, for example, just colonizing this branch office gets us 7.4 energy per month. And so the 1300 energy that we invested into it will pay off relatively shortly. Obviously, trade value will also grow on the planets that AI has, and so eventually this will produce something like 50 energy per month, which is quite amazing, and getting more branch offices is good for you.
Anomaly found. Construction complete.
Alright, let's see if there's any questions in the chat.
Sphere of influence expanded.
Stefan, what crime does? Well, crime is another mechanic that you have in your planets, and it's one of these little 5 values that you have. Crime will, increase crime. The more crime you have, the more criminals are going to be created, and criminals are basically jobs for your pops that reduce your trade value and still require upkeep. So criminals are bad, but they max out at 4 per planet.
Complete.
So it's not that bad if you have a very large planet. Crime will not be a problem because you'll only have like 4 pops, actually criminals. You could also reduce crime with policemen, enforcers, and good governors. Now, for example, on our capital world, crime is reduced by 25 by the police and by 6 by the governor. And so we don't have any crime issues for now. Also, as I can see here, the AI has expanded to duress, and so we won't be able to get this as a choke point. Since, these systems are pretty much worthless, we'll be able to fall back and set up a defensive station over here. Stations are generally the way to go for early empires, and keeping them around is much cheaper than keeping a fleet around. As you play the game, there will be a lot of different things that you have to do. For example, I just chose a tradition and a technology, and all these things will pop up intermittently throughout the game, and having a quick decision will generally help you out. The more time you spend on actually making decisions, the less time you'll be able to spend on playing the game, and so being too indecisive may hurt you in the long run. However, when you're just starting the game, I do truly recommend just go ahead and checking out the tooltips. Knowing what everything does is very useful and will allow you to make quicker decisions later down the line.
Star system charted.
As far as the galaxy generation goes, you may notice that there's different systems. For example, we have the regular star systems with various stars, and we also have black hole systems. And special systems like black holes actually have a penalty to combat in them. So for example, because this is a black hole and gravity is all messed up, combat in this system will reduce the disengagement chance and increase the cooldown for emergency FTL. Now, those things absolutely mean nothing for us at this point in the game, but later on, they're quite important. Disengagement chance is basically the chance of a ship getting out of combat alive instead of getting completely destroyed. And emergency FTL is something that takes up once you enter combat, and takes about 200 days to charge. Once it is completely charged, you can just retreat your fleet and just be out of there with minimal losses. That is very useful for losing battles, because for winning battles, you will generally not want to retreat. Yeah, also, generally the population numbers represent around 500 million pops. So for example, we have 500 million executives and 500 million enforcers. This also makes for some pretty weird events. For example, there's caravaneers that can come by and steal some of your pops, and it's really quite funny if they just go in and 4 billion pops just kind of get out of there. Just see the values of the caravaneers as ways, and just leave your planet. 4 billion pops, no problem. But yeah, I believe that about does it for the planets in terms of the main functions, and now we can get to the secondary functions. So there's decisions on your planets with which you can do certain things. For example, there's martial law. With martial law, you can increase stability on your planet and increase the amount of soldier jobs there are. Martial law is generally useful if you have very, very low stability, and you really need to get stability up on the planet. Low stability may be caused by problems within your empire, or it can be caused by having a lot of purged pops on the planet. If you're playing with a xenophobe, what you can do is actually purge the pops through forced labor, and you can just resettle all those pops to a single planet and have them work to death. And of course, having purged pops does take a toll on stability. If you have, a couple of trillion pops on a single planet, they will be unhappy, and having a couple enforcers will not stop them. The police, however, the military, however, will. And martial law may be very useful in that regard.
Found.
Martial law costs influence to enact and reduces resources and pop growth. It's not really important if you have a lot of purge pops on the planet, but it is important because if you have martial law on a planet with no problems, it will generally be a detriment. There's also a decision for population controls. Generally, you will never want to use this decision because the more growth, the better, and you can generally find a place for all the different pops. For example, you can just go ahead and build commercial zones everywhere, and all those new pops will be employed. And in the end, having more pops produces more resources, and so seizing population is not good.
Construction complete.
Now, there's also decisions such as distribute luxury goods, and this consumes some TVs. And what you can do is you can go ahead and enact it on a planet for extra amenities. For example, we just had 7 amenities there, and with the decision, we got 8 more. That's quite nice, and it increases the happiness of our population. Alright, reading the comments. Stefan Annan, I keep hearing tall and wide empires and see them in videos. What does that mean? Well, generally, a wide empire is one that expands and aggressively conquers early on. So for example, if we were to go ahead and build a fleet right now and try to take out this empire, we will be going wide. Going wide does not mean just doing this at the early game. You can also just go wide at any point. And in fact, if you're going for any empire, you'll generally want to have a phase where you don't really do much, where you go tall and just build up internally, and then go wide and just conquer everything. Going tall allows you to focus on internal problems and not really so much on external conquest. Keeping a fleet around and actually going to war is quite expensive, and overdoing it may hurt your internal economy, and that is why going tall and focusing on your economy may actually be more of an advantage than going wide in the early game. Generally, the way I like to play is just build up my internal economy, go tall in the early game, and then go wide and destroy everything later on. Also, going tall and wide doesn't really have to do with the size of your empire. You can just claim a chunk of the galaxy and go tall in it, or you can start expanding with small nearby empires, and you're still going wide because you're going ahead and expanding aggressively. Is overpopulation a big problem later? No, it's not. The only problem overpopulation causes is that your organic pops will start growing once there's not enough housing. Besides that, you'll be able to just build a lot of commercial zones and just get a bunch of clerks going. Stopping growth is used sometimes when your planets are full in the super late game. Yes. However, it is generally better to just keep your population growing until they literally cannot grow. There's a cap to the amount of time that they grow. If your population is 50% over your housing, your organics will just simply cease growing. And at that point, you will experience some stability issues, but generally having those extra pops will be a benefit to your empire and your planet.
Technology secured.
Stefan, how do you make Jedi to conquer Xenos, and does it worth it? How do I make a Jedi to conquer the Xenos? Well, if you really want to go full Jedi spiritualist and start purging, there's a special empire type. It's called the Fanatic Purifiers, and basically what they do is they come in and purge other empires. Okay. Since the new empire, since the new update, Tall is not as good as it used to be. You could be decades ahead in research, back with the One Planet Challenge. That is just a comment. I disagree with that. Going tall is extremely powerful because focusing on building up your economy allows you to actually get more research and be ahead of the curve in terms of other empires. For example, if I'm going to help with like 6 planets, I may be able to actually beat out other empires with like 12 planets that are constantly expanding. And that is because if I focus on internal growth and don't really have a large fleet, that leaves a lot of resources and efficiency to be had on the planets. What's so special about Spiritualist and Psionics? I've never gone that route yet, might do it next. Well, the thing with Psionics is that it allows you to have more Unity production, and the Psionic Ascension path allows you to have better tech and the Shroud. And the Shroud is basically an entity that you can access that allows some bonuses and some detriments later down the line. Do I use robots? Yes. In every game, going robots as fast as possible is important. And to go robots, you actually need a couple techs. And that is powered exoskeletons and the robots themselves. So if I just exit to menu and load up a game, I'll be able to show up the path to actually get the robots. But generally the thing with psionics is that they're not as powerful as biology or roboticism, and so I generally don't go for psionics myself. By the way, there's a nice little button over here that allows you to see what you have researched in the past. Yeah, robots, you require powered exoskeletons and robotic workers. That way you can actually start building buildings to get robots producing. Roboticists require a single job, and they produce 2 growth per month. You can also modify the robots in certain ways. For example, you have advanced farm bots instead of the normal plebs, and they'll be more efficient. Hey Stefan, would you say machine empires and Gestalt consciousness are overpowered in this patch? Well, they're pretty good. Since this is a free weekend and I'm showing off an empire that is relatively normal, I'm not really talking about Gestalts, but generally, if you're new to the game and you have the money to buy the Utopia DLC, you're generally way better off with Gestalts than other empires. For example, if you just go ahead and take my 2 quintillion non-IQ swarm, you'll see that there's a lot less values to manage with this empire. For example, as a hive, we don't really have to deal with consumer goods, and consumer goods are a bit of a pain, so not having to deal with them is a blessing. There's also less buildings to manage, and there's also more jobs that you get from districts. And so generally, if you have Utopia, going hive minds is very good for a beginner because it allows you to manage less values, and you'll be better off generally. As machines, you have even less values to manage. So for example, if you go ahead and choose this empire and make it not a rogue servitor, you'll see that we have only 3 values to manage. We have minerals, energy, and alloys. Food and consumer goods are not necessary, and so we can just build very few buildings and very few districts. It's a lot easier to manage machine empires than normal empires, and if you have Synthetic Dawn, which is the DLC that unlocks this, I do recommend playing with it if you're just new to the game. How do you decide when to stop with expansion and when to go to war after development period? Well, generally I like to build up until I am either superior or overwhelming to other empires, and then just go to war and destroy everything. For example, we go to a save. Generally, the time that I start conquering is around year 100, so 2300. But you can easily do it earlier, or you can easily do it later. 100 years is generally a good time to build up your empire and economy, and a good time to get a massive advantage going. Can't you just switch from a megacorp to a regular empire and make it irrelevant? Yes, you can. One nifty feature of the megacorps is that you can actually just reform your government to a normal empire, choose certain civics, and just reform. Of course, the earliest you can actually reform is year 20, and so we won't be able to do that quite yet. But with megacorps, you have some early game bonuses. For example, with megacorps, you have more pops at the beginning of the game, and you also have private colony ships, in addition to a lot of trade value. Megacorps have a very powerful start, and starting with megacorps and switching to a normal empire is generally advised if you can do that. Also, should I build them on every planet? If you're talking about robots, yes. What are biology and robotic path? Which pros have each? Well, biology and roboticism are a bit later down the line. So if we can just go ahead and load up a game where I have a mid-game setup, such as this. Actually, no. I have a lot of empires that I play. Will I be able to see some of the Ascension paths? So, for example, if we go into Unity, Traditions rather, we'll be able to see that we have Ascension perks. And there are certain Ascension perks that allow you to go a certain path. For example, something like the Flesh is Weak gives you a special project to transform your species into cyborgs. Another project, which is later down the line, is going to be Synthetic Evolution, which allows us to just go ahead and turn all our species into robots. This Ascension is exclusive to the Utopia expansion, which is currently 50% off, so, I mean, it's really worth it if you don't have it. With Biology, you have certain other traits, such as... where is it? Oh, is it actually unlocked? Or is it locked? It seems to be locked because I'm going the robotic ascension path. You can only go one path at a time. Alright. Traditions, Ascension perks. There we go. Engineered Evolution is what you would go for first for a Bio-Ascension path, and Evolutionary Mastery is what you would go for second. With Bio-Ascension, you will get more trade points, and with trade points you can get your species to be better. With robots, you can get more robots and synths. And those robots will be produced a lot faster, and so a robotic ascension path is generally better than the organic one, and the organic one is generally better than the psionic one, because psionics are really random, and the bonus that you get from having good pops from organics is generally better than what you get with psionics. You do get a lot of bonuses with psionics, don't get me wrong, but it's generally less powerful than organics and synths. Also, to get this, you have to research certain technology. So if I go back into another save, there are a couple techs that we need to actually get before we can actually ascend. So if we go into traditions, actually no, research, we'll be able to see that there's a couple texts that you need to research to actually start getting some stuff. For example, to be able to get Bio-Ascension, we will have to research. I have researched a lot of stuff in this game. Where is it? Gene tailoring. The Bio-Ascension path requires a certain tech, and this tech is gene tailoring. With gene tailoring, we can actually go ahead and modify a species by creating a template and just removing or adding some traits. That is what you do with Bio-Ascension. You basically go ahead for your species and create a template that is better than what it was before. For example, we can just remove a couple detriments from these species, and we can add a couple good traits to them. Create a template and apply the template to our species. Then we research a special project, and after this project, we'll be able to just, get these species to be better. The Bio-Ascension path allows some pretty special traits, such as ones that increase your leader capabilities, and ones that increase your pop growth by 30%. So, Bio-Ascension path, pretty good. Synth Ascension path, generally better. With robots, you can be even better off than with better organics, and that is generally the way I go. In fact, for the past 10 games, I believe I've straight up just gone for the Robot Ascension every time. Is the Ascension perk that allows crossbreeding any good? I took it on my current playthrough, but I didn't think about going synthetic evolution. Well, I believe I have an empire with xenocompatibility, and it is actually useful as a synthetically ascended empire. So if we go ahead with... which was it? Happy Merchants, maybe. We can see that xenocompatibility helps with getting more pop growth. Basically, with robots and a synth ascension, you'll want to have a secondary species in your empire to actually breed as organics, in addition to your robots that are getting produced at a massive rate. Let me just show it off right here, right now. I hope this is the right save. Alright, looks like it. With this synthetic ascension, we can have an organic pop growing, and we can have a robot growing. And since we have a couple species on this planet, we have the species actually interbreed and get extra growth. So as you can see here, they're not actually growing at a faster rate, never mind. But basically you need two species on a planet, and every pop will be grown at a 25% extra rate. It's really useful, but it may produce some unwanted results. For example, you can have half rackets and like half weird lizard things. It's kind of nasty, but that's just me. More pop growth is always better, and as you can see here, with this empire we have 10 pop growth from organics and 12 pops growing per month from robots, and this adds up to 25 pop growth per month, which is quite insane and allows you to develop planets extremely fast. And that is the strength of the synth ascension. You get extra robots from extra roboticist jobs. With those roboticist jobs, you can get insane pop growth with robots, and if you add organics in the mix, it's just game over, really. And so you can be this tiny little thing and still be the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Yeah. Happy Merchants. completely dominating over everything. No problem. You can mix plants with animals, yes. Xenocompatibility is that strong. But anyways, let's get back to the free trade for free weekend empire. By the way, for any of you guys that are just tuning in, there is a free weekend for Stellaris, so please follow the link in the description to get your free trial for 2 days. And while this game normally costs 40 bucks, everything is also on sale for like a lot. And so you'll be able to get the game for like 10 bucks and then a lot of the DLCs for 50% off. So if you don't have the DLCs, I truly recommend getting them.
Technology secured. Technology secured.
Alright, so now we have our factions showing up as this empire, and we're getting a decent amount of influence from both of the factions. Nice. Also, one thing that is potentially useful is that if you have a decent enough opinion with another empire and you have a low enough fleet, they may actually be protective of you. And so you can actually just do whatever you want. And if another empire attacks you, they will have to face an empire that is protecting you. And generally, AI is rather smart and will not attack you if there's a massive empire just being protective about you. And so with this sort of thing, you can get on the good side of an empire and just do whatever you want and not even have to build any fleet. So for example, if I get that, I can just go ahead and stay with the 3 corvettes I get to the start and not even build a fleet until year 2300, at which point I just overwhelm everyone with superior tech and superior planet development. And speaking of planet development, generally what you want to go for is robots as the first building. The faster you can get 10 pops on a planet, the better, because on a new planet you have a penalty for pop growth. Of course, you don't have any pop growth at all if you have overcrowding, so we'll have to build a nice little district that pops aren't just, you know, not growing. We can see the reduced pop growth on this planet, however, where we have a minus 50% to pop growth from the fact that we have under 10 planets, 10 pops on this planet. You can also resettle pops to turn a colony into a normal world. However, this does take away from your main planet and may screw you over if you don't be careful about it. Also, we are now encountering the admin cap from the expansion, and admin cap is quite the thing. So admin cap basically negates any penalties you get from empire size. The bigger your empire is, the more penalties you have, and having a lot of admin cap just straight up subtracts from the empire size. So for example, as this empire we have 25 empire size and 80 admin cap. This means that we have no penalties for empire size. However, if I load into another save, we can see that admin cap may become a problem because your empire size may just grow out of control, and it may be better off just to get more admin cap to reduce the penalties. For example, with this empire we have 218 total size, with this relatively little empire over here, but we're getting 29% penalties to tech cost and 50% penalties to traditions. And so because of the size, we're getting penalized. Generally, it's better to expand despite the penalties, but reducing the penalties is also important. And so getting techs to actually reduce admin cap, increase admin cap rather, is important. So going for something like Galactic Bureaucracy, which increases admin cap by 20, will straight up just reduce the penalties on your empire. To actually get the admin cap techs, however, you have to go for adaptive bureaucracy, which may not seem too good at the beginning, and so many people just skip it. So pro tip, go for adaptive bureaucracy as soon as possible because it allows you to get the admin cap tax. Personally, I have made the mistake of just skipping adaptive bureaucracy in one of my games, and when I was testing Megacorps, I didn't choose adaptive bureaucracy, and so I was under the impression that you simply cannot get admin cap tax as a Megacorp, which was quite the misunderstanding, and now I realize that adaptive bureaucracy is the key to success. Also, while we're in this empire, I can show off some other things. For example, we can go to the ship designer and design some ships. Generally, you'll want to use auto-generate designs if you're just starting the game. However, if you can, and you have the experience, you can go ahead and design your own ships. As far as ships go, there's a couple pointers to them. With corvettes, you'll either want to go for picket corvettes, which just increase your picket and defense against missiles, or missile corvettes, which are quite good, especially if you have torpedoes. If you have torpedoes, you may have a swarm of corvettes that just comes in and annihilates everything. Torpedoes, let me just pop into another game to show off the effective torpedoes, are quite powerful. They have a single damage that is extremely potent, and okay, let me just show it off. Alright, torpedoes. Torpedoes are powerful. They have a single hit that deals 275 to 445 damage and a cooldown of 21. The cooldown in terms of fleets means days, so every 21 days these ships will be able to launch a torpedo, but since they deal so much damage initially, getting torpedoes on an initial strike is very powerful, and you may be able to just wipe out a part of the enemy fleet and not have them shoot at you. The faster you can wipe out a fleet, the less damage it will take. And so the best defense is a good offense, and that certainly holds true in this game. With destroyers, you will generally want to go for pickets because that's what destroyers are generally good for, defending against missiles and hangar bays. And for cruisers, you will generally not want to go cruisers. Cruisers may be useful to counter corvettes, but I found that generally AI does not spam corvettes, and if they do, you can just settle destroyers with pickets, and they'll do a decent enough job. Battleships, however, are the more interesting ship. With battleships, you have X weapon slots, which are very powerful. 110 weapons, they can just annihilate a ship with a single strike. These take a while to reload, but are extremely potent and are only mountable on battleships. You also have a lot of large weapons on your ships, and with your battleships, you generally will want to go for neutron launchers so that you have a lot of strike power. The most powerful ships on the enemy side will probably be large battleships, and so the tracking loss on your weapons is not going to be a big problem. In case you don't know, the way Stellaris combat works is that there's evasion and there's tracking to counter the evasion. So if, for example, a ship has 90 evasion and you have 60 tracking, the 60 will get subtracted from the 90 and you'll have 30 total evasion. And so evasion helps you avoid shots. There's pretty much just a 30% chance of shot avoidance, in addition to a 90% chance of hit. So with this weapon, if we have 60 tracking and we're firing at a 90 evasion corvette, for example, we will have a 90% chance to hit, but the enemy will also have a 30% chance to evade. There's also a guaranteed 5% chance of any weapon hitting, and so even 90 evasion corvettes, which is, by the way, the max evasion that you can get, will still get destroyed by neutron launchers if you have enough. Stefan, is it worth researching text for bigger singular fleets? Also, is it worth building strongholds? it is worth researching techs to actually get better fleets, and strongholds are powerful. Generally in the early game, you will just want to go for powerful stations because they're cheaper and more efficient to upkeep than an actual fleet. And so if you have decent choke points, you'll be able to use them instead of a fleet. And you can get strongholds to be quite powerful, and they'll be able to repel any sort of attack. Stefan, do you plan on making a video explaining all the tech in the game and its potency? I would if there were less than 1,000 techs in the game, but as it stands right now, there's a lot of technology, and comparing it all and putting up a tier list for tech is nigh impossible. Can you recommend some shipskin mods from the workshop? I don't play with the shipskin mods. I have the different expansions. For example, I have the humanoid expansion, which allows me to have humanoid ships, and I have the planetoid expansion, which allows me to have planetoid ships. But that's pretty much it. They cost like $5 a piece, and are just visual DLCs. Also, strikecraft are another thing that you may actually want to use, and strikecraft are decently powerful. Strikecraft are launched from your ships, and take a while to actually get to the enemy before they can attack. When they do attack, they do a little amount of damage very quickly, and they have a massive DPM. The problem is, with the massive DPM, they're not really useful for destroying the ships. Every ship, when it reaches a certain threshold, has a chance to just disengage, and if you hit an enemy repeatedly with small strikes, they're very likely to just disengage and not destroy. And generally you want to destroy other ships. You do not want them to disengage and keep living to fight another day. Besides that, strikecraft are very powerful, and I generally recommend getting them on stations because it is a very potent tactic in actually intimidating the enemy. Hangar bays and strikecraft are extremely powerful when it comes to fleet power, and so the numbers they generate are a lot bigger than that of other stations and other modules, and so the enemy will just be afraid to attack your station because it has big numbers. Hangar bays are overinflated in terms of the power they provide, and are generally cheaper than actually building a large station with a very powerful weapons. They are powerful, don't get me wrong, hangar bays, but they're not as powerful as they may seem from the numbers. What kind of platforms are the best hangars, or are the platforms useful? Now, I have mentioned hangar bays and strikecraft, but generally you will want to just go for hangar bays. No, you will want to go for strikecraft, because hangar bays are something that you put on the station itself as a module, and since hangar bays have a very limited amount of ships, if all of them are destroyed, the station will be useless. And so I generally put gun batteries on the main station, and strikecraft on the actual platforms. That way, the platforms get destroyed earlier, and the station itself has longer to fight. And so in the end, the gun batteries will produce more damage, while hangar bays on the platforms will die off before the platform is actually destroyed most of the time. So just because the main station lasts for longer means that you will generally not want to have hangar bays, and you will instead want to have strikecraft on the platforms. Should I specialize my planets immediately when I colonize them, or wait for a bit? Specialization is tempting in the early game, but it does not provide nearly enough bonuses to be justified. In the mid-game though, you can specialize planets and have certain buildings to produce extra output from certain things. And so, for example, if you specialize a mining world early game, you will only get a 5% bonus to mining output. But if you specialize it in the mid-game, you will be able to build a building to produce more minerals from your miners. For example, This building is planet unique and it allows 30% extra minerals from miners. This is not very useful if you have like 1 mining district, but if you have like 7, it becomes a lot more potent, and the 30% bonus is a lot more potent than the 5% bonus. In the early game, you will just want to build what you need, and you will generally just want to keep your economy afloat. Hangar bays do provide trade protection, but for trade protection you can generally just have a little fleet running around and patrolling your systems. Trade, by the way, is a mechanic that is new to 2.2, and it basically collects the trade value that is generated by a planet and makes it go all the way over to the capital. Trade value is collected by stations. So for example, this station has trade hubs which collect trade from 4 systems away. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4. This station collects trade value all the way from over here. And the trade value then flows from the station over to the main capital. The capital actually just deposits all the resources in your production, and so guarding the hyperlanes over to the capital is generally advisable. So yeah, generally though, if you have extra potential star bases, getting hangar bays on the star bases is not a bad idea. You could just produce protection and you'll be good to go. Hangar bays are not good on defensive stations, but they're good generally in terms of trade protection. Missile battery versus gun battery, which is better, advantages, disadvantages, etc. Well, with a missile battery, you have missiles, which can get shot down. With gun batteries, you cannot get shut down. And so getting missiles is okay if the enemy does not have any pickets, but if they do, it makes the station virtually useless. I generally go for gun batteries because it does not get countered by anything, but if you are really confident that the enemy does not have any point defense, you may be better off using missiles. Missiles also have higher range than normal weapons, and so getting a missile module on a station may be a good idea so that you can actually draw other enemy fleets earlier. When is the time to move from economic growth to build a first fleet? Yeah, right around year 2300. However, if you have opportunities to conquer weak opponents earlier, you may choose to do it earlier. Or if you're really in a spot where you can just continue to grow and develop and are not quite powerful enough, you can just continue developing up until 2400. But generally by that point, you will want to face a crisis. And the crisis is quite the problem, and you'll want to face it before actually going ahead and conquering everything. And yeah, generally I do it around the time I get battleships, and I get battleships around that time period. Of course, you can have battleships without having all the appropriate military tech. When I research tech in the early game, I generally don't go for military tech, I go for economic tech. And so after I get battleships, there's still the period of 20 years or so where I research everything that is needed to actually get the battleships to be useful. Otherwise, you would just have battleships with blue lasers running around, and while blue lasers are certainly powerful, you know, they're only tier 2 weapons. But yeah. Also, since we're here and there's a lot of diplomacy going on, I might as well show off the bottom right corner of the screen. Now, I didn't actually learn about the bottom right corner until much later down the game, but some of these things are quite useful. So first things first, sectors. When you start off the game, sectors map mode may be enabled. I generally want to disable that so that the Empire has a cleaner look. Hyperlanes map mode disables hyperlanes. This is only really useful for screenshots. Otherwise, you will just not know what the hell's going on. The trade routes map mode is useful for determining what the trade routes are and the routes that your fleets may want to patrol. Union's map mode can help out with determining which empires are on your side and which enemies are federated into a single thing. So for example, I can see that these empires are all in a federation, and attacking one of them will draw the ire of all the other ones. There's also diplomatic map mode, where you can see what your empire is and the relation of all the other empires in the galaxy to you. So you can see that purple is a federation, yellow is a subject, red is just they hate me, and this is just meh, where it's light red, and they just kind of dislike me. Green is when they're friendly. Green is, yeah, when they're friendly, and light green is when they have some deals with me. Also, you can click on certain empires to see the relations of other empires to them. So for example, I can go ahead and click on the Zoom arbitrators. These are a fallen empire that are at war with pretty much everyone. And you can see that everywhere there's hate. There's also an opinion map mode, which is just another version of the diplomatic map mode, which just takes the values of opinion. For example, we can see that this empire doesn't really like us. They have -93 opinion, and we won't really be able to do much with them. Very useful map mode. Also, I almost missed it, but with the diplomatic map mode, you can actually check out the claims other empires have. So for example, if we click on this empire with the diplomatic map mode, we can see that they have claims on these 3 systems. And if they ever go to war with the regime of Zerog, they'll be able to take the systems and claim them in war. AI attitude map mode is also very important. We can see that this empire is hostile to us, and yeah, this is also valuable for all the empires. Neighbor map mode may also show you which empires are considered your neighbors, and neighbors map mode is really not too useful. It's generally just not too useful. Before, you were only able to declare war on neighbors and make rivalries with neighbors, but that has since been long gone, and so there really is no use for this map mode. There's also a couple other options. I can click on Go To, and that will navigate to the camera where the home system is located. So you can go to your home system by pressing this button, or you can also just press Delete. There are some short hotkeys in this game, but you cannot set them. There's also a very useful thing here called the search bar. You can also pull this up with F. And with this, you'll be able to search up a system, and clicking on it will take you to it. Very useful, especially if you're playing multiplayer. There's also multiplayer chat in case you're playing multiplayer, and there's also this thing. This is extremely useful. This is an in-game browser, so you will be able to access the internet, more specifically the Stellaris wiki, while you play the game without having to pull up the browser. What is extremely important in this is that there is a page that can help you out tremendously, and that is called AI Personalities. With this page, there's a lot of info about all the different AIs and the way they actually function. So for example, we can go ahead and see that honor-bound warriors have certain values to them. So if you go ahead and check out an empire, we can see that their AI empire type is over here down at the bottom, and we can compare the values of the empire type to the wiki to actually determine what they're going to be preferring to do. So for example, we can use this to act against these guys, they're ruthless capitalists, by going to help looking up ruthless capitalists and seeing that they, for example, prefer kinetic weapons. That means that we can focus on getting armor in order to counter them, and that will generally just aid us significantly in war. We can see that they're more likely to build new colonies, they're not really brave, and they're not going to really hate us for border friction. All these values are very useful, and some empires may even have a specific preference to armor or shields. For example, this empire has a slight preference to shields, so that means the kinetics are more effective against them. But some empires are really disbalanced. For example, the Deccan hierarchy is more likely to use shields, and kinetic weapons are really, really useful against them. And yeah, overall, there's all the different values for all the different empire types, and this is extremely useful against AI when you can just pause the game and take a look at how to best counter them. And obviously, there's also the main menu. In the main menu, there are a couple settings. Obviously, you have your graphics, which is not really expansive for a game of this scope, and there's also sound. Yes, you can control sound. Oh, radical. There's also gameplay. Autosave is pretty important. If you're playing without Iron Man, you will generally want to autosave so that you can actually reload games in case your computer crashes, or potentially you want to reload to redo something. Now for that purpose, I have the autosave set to annually, and that way if I want to try something different, something that I have not done that may screw over my empire, I can just do the thing and then reload to a previous save. Annually allows you to also undo your screw-ups, and generally when you just started the game, reloading the save is advisable. So if you're an experienced player, reloading and save scumming is not good, but if you're just starting and are new to the game, being able to reload and fix your mistakes is vital, because it allows you to learn and try out different options. And the more options you try out, the more knowledge you have, and the better you're going to be off in the future. There's also all the other things, such as tutorial, and by the way, there is a little tutorial in the game that may help you out somewhat, but it's generally alright, I guess. Alright, Poot is commenting whether or not I have a Discord in the description. I do. By the way, if you're not in the Discord, I advise you to join it, because there's a lot of Stellaris discussion and memes going on there that may help you out in getting better at the game. And now we can actually start talking about war. So right now I'm in a war with two different empires. One of them I'm involved in myself, and one of them I'm involved with as a federation. Let me just reload to a save where I'm not in these wars to show you how the process of declaring war actually works. Alright, looks like we're only at one war at this point in the game. And we can go ahead and try to war against someone like this. Actually, no, these are Federation members. What am I doing? Let's, for example, try to justify war against these guys. Or actually, no, they're subjects. Is there really no one that I can attack? What is this? Ah, the Zoom Arbitrators. Well, this is a fallen empire, so war with them is not really a good representation of war in general, but these guys are pathetic to us, and we can just go ahead and attack them. So, before a war, I generally advise to move the fleets into position, because if you just start a war and not attack immediately, you'll be in a pretty bad situation because they'll be able to prepare for you, and we'll be able to wipe you. And you don't want to let the enemy prepare at all. So with war, what you do is you can generally just make claims on the enemy. So for example, we can claim a couple of their systems and justify war as a conquering war. Since these guys are Fallen Empire, all we can do is end threat containment, and this initiates a total war against them. There's two types of war out there, normal war and total war. With normal war, you can just go ahead and claim their territory, and once the war is over, the territory goes back to them. In total war, however, when you claim territory, it becomes yours. And so the enemy will either have to reclaim it, or you will just keep the territory. You'll be able to do everything with the territory as you would with any other territory, and you can potentially just completely annex an empire in a single war. Generally, however, you will want to make a couple of claims at a time and go to multiple wars. Someone in the chat is saying that there's actually a mod for hotkeys. Please go ahead and post the link. I may even use this and recommend it in the future. But anyways, let's get our fleet into position and then attack them once it is time.
Building ruined.
Of course, as you can see here, in the late game, performance does take a downturn, but it is still manageable. Alternatively, you can, instead of go into multiple wars and claiming a couple of systems at a time, you can just claim the capital of an enemy empire and just annex them. In the early game, the capital is likely all they're going to have, but in the late game, the capital is still going to be very important, and taking the capital will be a big blow to their economy. Also, pro tip, you're going to have crime on your worlds. However, instead of trying to deal with crime with enforcement, you will generally just want to go ahead and enable a crime lord deal. With a crime lord deal, you will get extra stability, and though you will get extra crime, it only actually applies if your crime is already above 0. So for example, on the Arctic Gaia, we have a couple enforcers, and they keep the crime below 100, and that means that the crime deal modifier to extra crime does not actually apply. You can make a crime lord deal if you have above 50% crime, and so for example on this planet we can go ahead, enable it, and we'll be better off. What the crime lord deal also does is that it completely negates any negatives from having a lot of crime, and so while generally more crime equals more bad events, with the crime lord deal all the negative events are simply disabled.
Technology secured.
Someone's commenting, a little performance problem with 50 times lower speed? Yes. I mean, generally in the late game you have more things to manage, so it's not really too noticeable. But of course, if you're playing with just 5 planets all throughout the game,
Secured.
you may get a little bored. In the late game, though, you have to manage a lot more,
Spaceport under
and
attack.
generally time flies nearly as fast. But anyways, we have our fleets in position, and so let's go to war to destroy this fallen empire. Since I am in a federation, I will have my members vote on it,
We have declared war to safeguard our interests.
and then I'll be able to invade. Claims, by the way, are more expensive when during a war, so make your claims before a war, come in and enforce them, and you'll be alright. And while I do say that performance is not really that big of a problem, it can cause some crashes later down in the game, but generally, if you have a powerful enough PC, you will not have many problems. Generally, I play on small or tiny galaxies, and that allows me to not suffer
Construction
with
complete.
500 empires getting processed by the game engine. Regarding federations, is there any way to get the other members to not just spam corvettes? Not exactly a bad thing, just gets a little bland sometimes. Well, that depends on the federation. When you become a federation leader, you will have control of the fleets, and there's a cap to how many fleets you can have. Generally, I like to spam my own ships, and so the other federation members are not really going to be causing any problems. If you're ever sitting a late game without any management to do, unlikely lol, you can max zoom in the galaxy map and it will run a little bit faster. Like this. That's interesting.
Station under attack.
You could also try Glavius AI mod to change how the AI builds fleets. Oh, please game. Don't do this to me. Yeah, the Glavius mod is very useful. In fact, I am using it right now. And with the Glavius mod, you're not going to have too many problems. It will be a lot smarter and will not just, suicide and all. Economy management with AI is also a lot better in that way. So, yeah. Like this game crashes. Zoom in. You mean this?
Zero-G research platform disrupted.
I'll try that mod next playthrough. Thanks, Stefan. Last game was still building up my own fleet, and members filled up the full 500 with corvettes. Yeah, sometimes AI spams corvettes, but with Glavius, it is a lot less common. I've seen them actually build normal corvettes and stuff. Not normal corvettes. Normal ships such as battleships. Also, if you're the most powerful member in the Federation, you also have complete control over ship design. So, managing the best ships will be the way to go. Alright, apparently, the chat says that just zooming in like this is a way to increase performance. I mean, there's a lot to look at, but it is a thing. I mean, I suppose the game does run a little faster. That is interesting. And yeah, while I was talking, we have been claiming this empire, and all the systems that don't have planets in them we have claimed, but otherwise we're going to have to go ahead and invade them. If we don't invade the planets, at the end of the war, they will get all their systems back, and that is no good. So we're just going to have to get this massive transport fleet going
Construction complete.
to just invade a couple of their planets. Also, one of the most important things about going for a tech rush, if you choose to go so, is that you can actually get admin cap techs very early. So if you overexpand early on in order to get more and more research, you can get admin cap techs to actually negate that. So for example, with this empire, at this point in the game, we have 1065 admin cap. And so if we chose to annex 2 other empires, we would still be under admin cap and be good. This is on 0.5 tech speed. So, I mean, that is also a factor, but 17,000 research does help out quite a bit.
Technology secured. Receiving communications.
Is the ship component that gives hull and armor regen ever useful? Seems like such a low amount. Sometimes I put it on Corvette fleet that I plan on keeping behind enemy lines for a while. It's not really useful. Well, okay, it's useful, but it's not as useful as something like afterburners. Generally, with all my ships, I go for afterburners, and that allows them to move around a lot faster and be more efficient. Because the best war is a quick war. And the quicker you can mobilize your fleets to actually take out the enemy, the less they will be able to resist, and the less losses you will have. Blitzkrieg is the way. Also, speaking of Blitzkrieg, something that is very important in conquering other empires is actually taking their shipyards. If you can just disable the enemy shipyards, you will be able to just negate their ability to do stuff. So even if they have a massive economy but only 2 shipyards, taking those shipyards will just allow you to, simply negate their economy advantage. So if you know where the enemy shipyards are, you'll be able to jump on top of them, take them out, and the enemy will have nothing. If they're not prepared for war and they don't have enough shipyards, they will not be able to mobilize fast enough to resist your Blitzkrieg. Therefore, Blitzkrieg is key. And by the way, the reason for this performance downgrade in the late game is because Stellaris only uses 1 CPU core, meaning that only one of your cores is actually overloaded and busy calculating stuff, meaning that if you have any more than 1 core on your CPU, which you probably will have unless you have like a 1950 PC, you'll be able to run and do stuff in the background without any problem. So for example, streaming something or browsing Google Chrome in the background will not actually hurt the performance of Stellaris because you'll just utilize the other cores on your CPU.
Construction complete.
Someone is saying that Stellaris does in fact scale across multiple cores. That may be true, but I have seen the core performance while I'm running Stellaris, and what it is 1 core is 100% usage, and some other cores are like 5%. So, I mean, I guess it does spread out technically, but it's a very low amount of spread. "1950 PC, that's the one Alan Turing created." Yes. Unless you are Alan Turing in the 1950s, you will be able to run Chrome in the background. Also, speaking of computers, while we're at it, I really do need a better computer, so if anyone can donate spare a dime, I'll be very, very grateful, because right now I have a Ryzen 1600, which has like a 3.4 gigahertz per core CPU, so Stellaris doesn't really run too well. I need something more powerful, and I simply cannot afford it right now. So any help will be greatly appreciated. But yeah, we're now getting our transport ships over to the systems that we need to actually conquer. And now we can go ahead and invade them and destroy their defensive force.
Planetary invasion
also, to increase performance, taking out other empires is also great. So if you can, just go ahead and destroy some enemies, and your game will run faster. The game literally encourages aggressive gameplay. But yeah, this is what war pretty much is. As you have seen at the beginning of the war, I basically just get my stack into position. Since we have about 2 million fleet power just in the stack, I'm able to just completely devastate any enemy that comes my way. Battles in the mid game and the late game are generally more even, and so actual strategy does play a part. But strategy, of course, is also limited. It comes down to the ship design and the position and the place where your ships actually do combat. For example, some basics are that if you position a fleet at the top of the hyperlane where the enemy is coming, you'll be able to take them out as soon as they arrive. This is extremely useful for corvettes with a low range, but are not useful for battleships. So if you're playing with battleships, station your ships somewhere in the middle of the system. But if you are playing with corvettes, getting them somewhere near a hyperlane is very nice and extremely useful. Also, getting ships near stations is incredibly good as well. Stations take some firepower, and they also give some firepower. So getting stations to draw some of the damage will allow you to get your ships to fire for a lot more. Ships generally have more firepower than normal stations, and keeping them alive is important. That's why I generally position my fleets just right behind a station when the enemy comes, so that the station can engage first, and then the enemies can engage second. I'm getting a super chat from Blake Boyles. Thank you so much. You definitely earned it, but my first super chat goes to you. Thank you so much, man. This will go a long way to allowing me to run the game faster. Yeah. Okay, I may want to play another save because this is just getting a little ridiculous. Let's save game and load up something else. That is the reason why I play early and mid game, and I generally don't play the late game. My PC simply cannot run it. Alright, what else is there? If there's any questions, please leave them in the comments, but otherwise, I'll start wrapping up the stream. So the basics of it is that, Stellaris is a great game. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of mechanics that you have to manage, and if you know how to manage them and how to set up planets and stuff, you'll be in a good spot. This game is quite complex and has quite a lot of content in it, and quite a lot of content has been added over time in DLCs. And so, a lot of technology, a lot of different enemies, a lot of different features are locked behind DLCs. There's, roughly 10 DLCs out there. They're all on sale right now, 50% off, so if you really want the DLCs, go buy them. Yeah, they're generally worth it with 50% off. Full price, some of them are not. For example, something like Apocalypse only adds Titans and Colossi. However, 50% off, it's generally worth it. Megacorp DLC is also up on 20% off, and getting Megacorps is going to be a great boon. The biggest thing about Megacorps is not even the Megacorp government type, it's the fact that you can actually build Ecomonopoli. And so Ecomonopoli with your ecology project are probably one of the most powerful Ascension perks in the entire game, and so not having it is a bit of a detriment when it comes to playing the game. Of course, if you're playing the game with multiplayer, the host actually determines what DLCs you have. And so if you're playing a game with a host with all the DLCs, you're going to be able to access everything. And so that is just another reason to just go ahead and play with other people. With other people, you may be able to try out some features from different DLCs, and you may be able to decide for yourself whether it is worth it or not. However, I advise you to go ahead and do so relatively soon, because the sale is going to end on Monday, and after that it's generally going to be 2 months or so until another sale comes around. I'm obviously not sponsored by Paradox to do this, but I do encourage people to get the game and experience it to the fullest potential. Alright, let's see if there's any questions, and I'll be able to wrap up this video. Stellaris is all about plot. Well, thing is, there's two ways to play Stellaris. Either you roleplay hard, or you min-max hard. So with min-max, you will be able to build up your empire, you'll be able to become overwhelming to everyone in the galaxy, and you'll be able to dominate and get pleasure from that. You can also RP, roleplay, and you can develop an empire in a roleplay style. I can't really explain roleplay, it's roleplay. And with that, you'll be able to customize your empire, you'll be able to do a lot of different things for the sake of your empire, and with roleplay, you have a lot of options, really. This game is really, really roleplay friendly, and more and more things are added every update in order to ensure that there's so many customizability options out there that it literally takes hours upon hours to actually read through all the options and decide for yourself what is best. Therefore, when you're just starting the game, roleplay is generally better than min-maxing, because with min-maxing, you have to actually read through a lot of stuff and know a lot of features in the game. However, with roleplay, there's a lot of less things to actually manage, and you'll be able to do the things that you want instead of doing the things that are most efficient. And doing the things that you want allows you to actually spend less time doing things and managing your empire, and just enjoying the game. Of course, there's some enjoyment in just playing the game, and I certainly have enjoyment in getting the game and running it as efficiently as possible. But there's also a lot of pleasure in just doing whatever, role playing and everything. So yeah. I don't see any questions, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll be leaving the stream. So, as always, I will be uploading videos relatively soon. There will be a traits list out there, which I will cover in depth, which will explain all the different traits for the different species and the machines. and I'll also be doing a continuation of the Let's Play that I have. Obviously, at this point, I'm too tired to continue because, as you can tell, I'm slurring some of the words. I still don't have a lot of experience with live streaming, but live streams will come in the future. So thanks everyone for watching, praise the burb, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.